Right, so welcome everybody to Coaches Uncaged and the most recent interview with Catherine Watkin. I'm really excited to be interviewing Catherine today as well. Yeah, I kind of worked with Catherine back in the day when I first took my role on at Animas, and yeah, there was a really big improvement, shall I say, in my work practically and psychologically after working with Kath. So yeah, it's really nice to be interviewing her kind of over a year later to kind of find out about her personal journey from qualification to a thriving business. So yeah, without further ado, I'll welcome Kath into the space. Hey Kath, how you doing?
Hello, I'm really well. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. And yeah, how are you doing today? Where are you? Where are you based?
I'm sort of based online, really. I mean, physically today, I'm not far from Chester, but I'm in North Wales, just across the English border.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're from Wales originally, right?
Yes, I was born in Wales. I was born in South Wales, Cardiff.
Nice, nice.
But I've been living in England for since I was old enough to leave home. I was in England as fast as I could get there. There's some Welsh
Yeah.
people listening, but no, I made England my home.
Nice. Yeah, I kind of knew that actually because I've read some of your backstory on some of your blog posts as I was kind of sharing with you before this interview. And why I thought this interview would be quite interesting is, well, there's lots of coaches in our community that are looking to create a thriving business. And what's interesting also is where I guess you're not a coach delivering coaching services, but you're someone that's kind of lent back into your existing skill set and created a business off the back of that, not just through coach training itself. And I imagine there's going to be lots of transferable skills and wisdom that came through that journey that you've been on. That'll be worth exploring over the kind of next 45 minutes.
Yeah, and actually, I'd probably correct that slightly because I am a coach. I trained with Animas originally, and I qualified in 2011. So I'm a coach from that perspective. What I'm not is I'm not a coach as my core skill set. So I don't position or market myself as a coach, and I don't have coaching as my core service. Coaching is one of the tools that I use to help facilitate the transformation in my clients. So I don't know if people listening know, but my business is called Selling from the Heart. And what I'm best known for is for teaching coaches and other types of practitioners how to sell without being pushy and sleazy, and also then how to grow a business without compromising their values or their integrity. And of course, as part of that, I teach a lot. I'm very much focused on teaching, and I have an expertise that I teach, I mentor, I share. But that's not enough on its own. As any good coach knows, there's also the internal journey as well. So yes, I spend a good chunk of my business life telling people what I think they could do and what I think would work for them. But there's also a big element of coaching. What is the resistance? How do they feel about this? What's getting in the way? How would they like to feel about it instead? What might need to change? All of these sort of, if I wasn't a coach, I wouldn't be as good as a business mentor and trainer.
Makes sense. Yeah. And yeah, I was kind of aware you trained with us back in the day. You also used to do my role, I think, and used to run the introductory sessions as well, if I remember. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it was, yes, I don't know exactly what you do, but Animus was much smaller back in those days. And from about late 2011, I actually ran all the sales for Animus. It wasn't called Animus back in the day, but I ran all of the one day. We did back then, we did live 1 day discovery days. It was the equivalent of what you now call the introduction to coaching days. And I ran all of those, and I did all of the follow-up calls and enrolled people into the course. And I did that for 3 whole years. Even after this business was really established and doing well financially, I couldn't quite tear myself away because Animus was my family, really. It was a real wrench to stop doing that work. But I've stayed good friends with Nick, and I've stayed very connected to Animus. And like, here I am, I'm very, very regularly. I've done sales consulting for the sales team, as you know, being part of that. I regularly come and do sessions like this. So in a way, I shouldn't have been so nervous about leaving my family.
Yeah, you're very much part of the furniture, I would say, from my perspective as well, from since I joined as a student and then later as an employee. And it's interesting you to talk about, as you talk about sales and training and coaching being a kind of core skill of that, because you're not the first person I spoke to from the sales world that are interested in coaching as well, because empathetic selling is really coaching, if you don't mind me kind of saying. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I often say it actually, because I teach a process for sales called the 7 steps to yes. But a lot of the people who come and learn from me, they don't even want to learn this really effective process that I teach because they don't want to sell. There's this real resistance. And these people have a lot of feelings about sales, like not positive feelings. And I often say to people, don't get caught up thinking that sales is about closing techniques or objection handling techniques or manipulating people. Think of it instead. If you look at the structure that I teach and you're a coach, if you look at it, it actually looks more like a coaching model for decision making. And if you can think about sales as a coach or a process like mine as a coaching model to help somebody reach a decision, that feels a lot more comfortable than calling it sales. But yes, that's exactly what I say.
Yeah, and it completely reminds me of the work that we did together when you kind of trained and mentored me about changing that focus on moving someone to a decision rather than closing, shall we say, which
Yeah.
feels a lot more congruent, I think, for a lot of heart-centered business people. And obviously we could go down that route, but you've done that plenty of times in the Animas space in the previous interview and the teaching you do. But today we're going to look at your personal journey from qualification to thriving business. And I'll share with people who are listening and also the audience. I read a really interesting blog post from you recently, which was called How I Found My Thing, AKA My Purpose. I absolutely loved it. And there was so much in there that was really interesting about your journey and what you did over the years. And I'll share that in the comments later. But I thought perhaps we could look at that journey and, over the next half an hour and kind of see what comes up.
Yeah, and I reread that blog post today because you mentioned it. And I was like, wow, gosh, it was long. It was good though. I think there's a lot in there for people. So I'm really happy with you sharing that.
Yeah, it was super interesting. And yeah, you had a really highly engaged community of comments as well, I noticed, off the back of that post. So yeah, let's kind of like dive into that. And I don't know if stage one for you was qualification, but feel free to kind of kick off and let us know about that journey.
Well, for me, in terms of my journey of finding my thing, so that blog post you're relating to is more like an article. It's more like a book, really. It was called How I Found My Thing, aka My Purpose. And the training as a coach came really far into that journey. I think I'd been seeking this thing that I was meant to do for about 5 years before I finally trained as a coach. But the thing is that a lot of those other things, and I think people listening will find this is quite common, a lot of those other things were like deflecting activities, because the thing that I always wanted to do desperately, and I had done for about 10 years, was to be a coach. But I was so scared of being a coach. I didn't think I'd be good enough. Who am I to coach other people? All of this. I was so terrified of becoming a coach that I didn't do the thing that I wanted to do more than anything. I did all these other things on the way because they were easier. They were less scary because I wasn't so invested in them. So coaching probably was the thing I wanted to do the most, but I didn't actually train as a coach until about 5 years after I had left my corporate role to go and seek this thing that I was supposed to be doing, which is quite interesting.
Wow. So there's like a psychological barrier that you put in front of yourself to stop you doing the thing that you really wanted to do.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think we can kind of all relate to that in the coaching world or anyone in career transition or transition in life.
Mm.
What do you think that resistance was about?
It was just fear. I think I wanted to be a coach so badly. When I was working in the corporate world and wasn't very happy and wasn't fulfilled, I started, I discovered the world of personal development through reading coaching books. That's where I started. There was a book called, I can't remember there was a woman called Cheryl Richardson who wrote a coaching book, and that was the first book I ever read. I've still got it somewhere. It's all dog-eared and underlined and pages folded over. And then there was Fiona Harrold's I think she wrote Be Your Own Life Coach. I think Cheryl Richardson wrote You Can Change Your Life. But these were massive for me at that time. You know, I'd done no personal development. I had no self-awareness. I was actually quite immature in my 30s. I wasn't very grown up or mature in anything really. And so for me, when I first started reading about coaching, it was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Oh my gosh, this is who I am. And I think when you come across something and you think, gosh, this is the thing that's been missing. This is who I really am. You're so invested in that probably on a subconscious level, the idea of training in it and then failing was the worst possible outcome. So anything else was more comfortable. Training as a hypnotherapist was more comfortable. Flying to Sri Lanka to study acupuncture was more comfortable. Becoming a yoga teacher was more comfortable. Selling a property to retrain in nutritional therapy was more comfortable, because none of it felt sort of life and death like the coaching felt life and death, because the coaching was who I really was. So I didn't do it.
Wow. You didn't do it until you did do it, of course, but you did all of those things. They're not actually just random examples. You actually did all of those things. And I thought you did.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you did those after qualification. Did you actually do them before you trained, rather?
It was only when I finally trained as a coach that I then did find my thing. I found my path. It was after I trained as a coach. So within less than a year of qualifying from Animas, which was then the Smart School, I was up and running with the business that I still have now 11 years later.
Got you. Oh, wow. So that was
After 5 years of seeking, 5 years of seeking. And it was unhappy seeking. It wasn't like, if you looked at it on paper or I wrote a book, I could spin it. It would look like I had the most amazing life, because I spent these 5 years living in India, Sri Lanka, traveling the world, studying all these things, trying out all these different things. But it didn't feel fun in the moment. It was like this desperate, I have to find what it is I'm here to do. So it wasn't particularly enjoyable. And yeah, 5 years into all of that, I finally did the training as a coach.
And what were the lessons you kind of learned across that 5 years?
I think probably the most important thing was just to keep trying things. I was lucky. I just want to say, not just lucky, I was very privileged in a way. I'd had a very well-paid career and I had a lot of money in the bank. So I was in my mid-30s. And when I finally quit my job to go and find what this thing is that I was going to do, I was single, I had no dependents. I was able to go and explore. I was able to go to India for a year. I was able to fly to Sri Lanka on a whim and enroll in acupuncture school. I was able to invest in all these different trainings. So I know that not everyone's in that position. But for me, I just kept trying. You know, I would try one thing and I would realize, oh my gosh, this is what I thought I wanted to do. And this just doesn't feel like, this isn't it. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel any better than what I was doing before. It's just different. So then I would try something else and I would try something else. And interestingly, even when I finally qualified as a coach and I set up as a coach, it still felt the same. I would be coaching people and I would feel, this isn't it. You know, can you imagine all of that? I'd finally got the courage to train as a coach and I still sat in front of my clients thinking, something's missing here. This doesn't feel, this isn't it. This just doesn't feel right.
That's really interesting. We'll definitely get to that part later, if you don't mind. But whilst we're in
anyway, you asked about the lesson, so just a shortcut that I only found the thing by going out and trying things and sort of getting the feedback. Do I enjoy it? Does this work for me? I never in a million years would have got where I am now if I had sat at home with notebooks trying to figure out on my own. I also worked with a coach. And interestingly, after that 5 years, it was working with a coach that got me on the right path.
That is interesting. So it's around getting support from others, but also staying in motion and trying new things.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking how this translates to any of the coaches listening from our community, because I often see coaches and myself also thinking about needing a niche before we start, or needing to have the website before we start. And there's all these things that we can put in our way before we actually start. And really, it's what you're saying is just do those things, anyway and
Because you
go
don't
through the
know,
process.
because you don't know. Like in my, I have a membership, so I have a course which teaches people how to sell, but I also have a membership called Business from the Heart, which is business in the broader sense. And I'm always trying to encourage people, lots of new coaches come in and join. I always try and encourage them, go out and get clients first. Don't build your website till you've sold at least your first 2 packages. You've worked with a handful of people. Because I made the mistake, I'd have some idea about what I wanted to do. I then spent months learning WordPress from a book, creating my own website, literally wasting 3 months, only to start coaching those people in that niche to find that I didn't enjoy it, or it didn't work in one way or another. So then I had a brand new idea. I must have created 4 websites in my first year. Nick Bolton was my mentor at the time. Animas, like I said, it was much smaller. He had a small mastermind that he had alongside the coaching course. And I actually had a one-to-one business mentoring call with him every month. Every single month, I would turn up with a whole new niche, struggling with my website for this new niche that I hadn't even tested. I think he was so frustrated with me. It's amazing I am still part of the Animas family. And the thing is, you can't know what's right for you. You can't know what you want to do until you're doing it and you've experienced it. And so, yeah, putting all of those things in place, you can just be wasting time. It's better to just get out there, work with clients, learn how to sell, learn how to market, get paid. Then you can use the money you're earning with your clients to build your website.
Makes complete sense. And as you hear it in hindsight or from experience, but the knowing of it sometimes doesn't stop the resistance to practically applying it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're looking at kind of that journey that you were on, and my understanding is you kind of went with your hobbies around what you were passionate about. You mentioned yoga, nutritional therapy, and also you went with your life experience. I kind of understand you had chronic fatigue coming out of that corporate sales job. And when I look at that and I look at coaches out in the world thinking about what their niche might be and always going to be gravitating to their experience or their hobbies, what I can take from that is that's not always the case. They don't always marry up based on your experience. But do you want to talk a little bit about your experience of trying your hobbies out as your careers?
Yeah, for me, I don't know if I see this as much now, but maybe it's just because I'm in a different phase of life and business. But back in the day when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, there was loads and loads of messages about follow your passion, make a business out of your passion, lots of courses and books on pretty much that topic. And actually, for me, I realized a couple of things. One was, so my biggest passion around that time was dancing. I used to go several times a week. I used to do Sarok, and I was also learning Lindy Hop. I worked with a coach at that time who understood that I loved travel and that I loved teaching dance, and who decided that what I should do is open a dance school in Italy. I mean, I just instinctively knew dancing is my passion. If this was my business and I was running a dance school, it would take away all that escapism and all that joy that I have, because this is my release. So I don't think that automatically people should set up a business following their passion, because they might just want their passion to be their passion. But the other thing is that not all passions, and some people won't say this, but I really believe this, not every passion or hobby is a commercially viable thing to do as a business. So, maybe money's not an issue and you want to do something purely from passion, great. But if you need to earn a living, and I needed to earn a living, I certainly earn a much better living doing what I do now than if I'd say followed other passions, for example. So there's that to consider as well. So I definitely didn't follow the route of build a business around your passion, but I did build a business doing something I love, and I think that's really important. I think I'm at the point where I've lost track, but I think that this is my 11th year in business. I think this year is my 11th year. You have to love what you do for it to have that longevity and that sustainability, especially if you're doing it alone from home, because the only person to motivate you really is yourself. And but for me, a business that I love, like my passion and my hobby wasn't sales, right? It was my job. So it was my past work experience that I turned into a business. And then as it happens, I love my business and I love teaching and I love the community that I've grown. But sales was definitely not my passion. But so, but I think it's important. I don't think it works. I see some people a lot saying, oh, I've decided I'm going to go and do X, Y, Z in the corporate world because that's going to make me more money. But actually, if they're not passionate about it, starting a business is really hard. It's really, really tough going to get a business off the ground. And also, even once it's off the ground, there's setbacks and roadblocks and lots of real lows as well as highs. It's really hard to keep going through all of that if you don't love what you do. So I think it is important.
Yeah, and I guess it comes back to the core of what you mentioned at the start of the call, and that blog post is around what you love to do is help people, and through teaching people your sales skill set and everything else that comes with that, you're helping them ultimately.
Yeah, and I think, I got really hung up on this idea that sales is part of the corporate world, and I don't want anything to do with that world anymore because I want to get paid for helping people. I'd always wanted to help people. I studied psychology at university. My mother was a social worker. My dad was a teacher. I come from a background of helping people. I expected to grow up and get paid to help people for my living. And so I was so hung up on, I must be a healer. I've got to find the modality, is it NLP? Is it energy healing? And I just didn't associate the fact that teaching people to sell could be so helping. And it is so transformational. And I really believe that, we all have our different ways of making our difference. But the difference that I make to people is massive, absolutely massive. Not just to the people whose businesses work because they work with me, because they grow in confidence, they grow as role models, they are able to contribute in different ways, they're able to support their families, but also their clients. So every coach who I can teach to have a successful business, every single client they work with through the year benefits, where otherwise they wouldn't have benefited because that person didn't know how to attract and enroll them. So it's deeply, deeply fulfilling, the work that I do. But I would have never thought that. I didn't see that coming because I was so hung up on the idea that it had to be something much more obviously helping, like healing or pure coaching or hypnotherapy or something.
I was nodding along vigorously as you were speaking then, because it all makes sense. And that skill set that we learn can support us in so many areas of our life, particularly like helping our clients and developing these practices. It's that butterfly effect, right?
Yeah, and I think too many people, walk away from what they've done. This is what I tried to do. I don't want anything to do with what I've done before. I want to close the door and go and find this other thing. I think too many people try and walk away completely from what they did before, train as brand new coaches and almost start out from scratch without realizing just how much impact, maybe more of an impact they could be having if they were to combine it with what they already have.
Yeah, and that's an interesting topic because I'm seeing more and more coaches who train and then combine their existing skill set, like you have, with creating their business. And we can look at that shortly as well. Something I wanted to just kind of quiz you around was that transition from a corporate role, which I assume is pretty high paying, to taking that leap. You mentioned about the fear of doing something that you really love and putting barriers there, but I'm thinking about lots of coaches out there that have got a steady 9-to-5 job and they're thinking about making that leap. Can they do that? What was that like for you, the emotional hurdle and the practical hurdle of that transition of income?
Oh, that's a really interesting one because I'd been brought up in my family background not to value money, particularly. Actually, not to value money at all. I was brought up to be happy, money didn't matter. Then when I finally started working in sales and I started earning money, I was like, oh my gosh, nobody ever told me it's amazing to have loads of money. I used to imagine I'd love to bring my salary home from work and just throw it all up in the air, and play in it. And I then became, I think, over attached to the idea of earning money. It became really important to me that I was earning a lot and that I was saving for my future. But I think there was this point that came where the unfulfillment and this really deep sense that I wasn't living on purpose and that I wasn't living a life of meaning, that feeling in the end overtook the drive that I had at that time to earn money. And when that overtook that drive to earn money was when I left, because I think something flipped again and I realized money isn't everything. If I'm not happy, it's not that important. And interesting, when I went to seek the various different things, as you can see from what I listed, it wasn't like I was going out there going, right, money's important to me, so where can I go and make the biggest bang for my buck? Because I might have gone straight into property investment, for example. I could have done. I had enough money to one side that I probably could have had a career in property investment, but that wasn't on my list because I wanted to help people. So none of the things that I went off and pursued in that 5 years are things that people are renowned for making millions out of at all. They're lifestyle incomes, really. And yeah, I think for me it was just that the meaning, the drive to find purpose in my work and fulfillment became more important than how much money I was earning. And I did have a safety, well, I sort of had a safety net in that when I first left my job, I did have quite a lot of savings, and that was what allowed me to travel and invest in all of these trainings, as I said. But by the time I started this business, I'd really run that savings down. You know, that had pretty much gone on all of these adventures and all this exploring. And so I then took on freelance work. I had a skill set. I was very good at sales, and I took on 2 freelance sales roles. One of them was with Animas, because we've already referred to that. And I had another with another company that trained health practitioners. And those 2 jobs, they were both part-time, probably took me 5 hours every day to do. So they were more than part-time in my life, but it gave me the base income to be not as much as I'd earned when I worked full-time in corporate, but enough to live off in order to then grow my business alongside.
And as you say that, even though you did have a buffer, I still recognize there's a lot of courage in saying, I'm going to take a dip in income and I'm going to try something new, and knowing that it might fail and that you might have to pivot again like you did before. But courage seems to be the word that comes up for me.
Yeah, and I was single. I was in my 30s, but I was single. I didn't have children. I didn't have anyone depending on me. It was my mistakes to make. It was only going to affect my life. So I think that's always given me, and I'm child free through choice as well, by the way. That's always given me quite a large element of freedom about just following my own heart with things, whereas not everybody's in a position to do that because they've got other responsibilities.
Yeah, a combination of courage and context then that really kind of married together well for you.
Yeah.
Nice. Let's jump into that kind of final year where you accelerated, from my perception, from qualification to this thriving business. What happened? What you qualified, and then what?
So I did my training, and then I didn't qualify because I was so hung up on wanting to be a coach. But once I was trained as a coach, I didn't really care about the piece of paper. So I was really lazy. I did get qualified in the end, but not for a while. I was really lazy about getting qualified. So I finished my training. Then I've always struggled with my mental health over my life. It's always been a bit of a thing for me. So I then hit a period of massive, massive depression. So ran away to India for a few months, spent a chunk of time out there, came back, got these freelance sales roles set up, and probably spent the first year, once I'd come back from India, I probably spent the first year I call it flailing around, trying to figure out my niche by sitting at home, making notes in a notebook and trying to decide. And that was a year where I sort of cycled through these 4 different niches, none of which stuck, none of which really felt right to me. And in the end, what I started to notice was the final niche that I focused on. It wasn't really a niche, it was more of a message. And I said, I work with women around the age of 40 who are unfulfilled and want to make a change, which is very interesting because obviously I was talking about myself at that time. And what I started to find was that if people came to me for help with their relationships, or they were unfulfilled because they weren't happy in their job, I wasn't really hugely motivated to help them, unless they wanted to start a business or they were already running their own business. And what I noticed, I wasn't a business coach at that time. I almost didn't know any of the things I teach now, but I did have this sales background. And I found that the clients who excited me the most were the ones who I could help with their business by helping them improve their sales. And that just sort of naturally led on to me. What I did was I ended up working with a coach who challenged me to go to the founder of the coaching school where I trained. Of course, that was Nick, to pitch the idea of running a one-day workshop called Sales Success for Coaches. Now, at this time, I still thought I didn't want to teach sales. I was still very resistant, but I was like, go on then, I've got nothing to lose, I'll give it a go. Nick said yes. I ran a one-day workshop for 13 coaches called Sales Success for Coaches. And that was the moment that I just knew. I knew it. And I'm going to call it selling from the heart. I just knew. And from then, really, so the first year I floundered around. But when I look back, it was a very typical journey. I see lots of the clients who work with me take that sort of journey. They're trying things out. And like I said before, you have to keep moving. You have to keep moving and trying, otherwise you don't know. And then I started investing in getting help with my business, because of course I'd done all this training in all these various modalities, and I had trained as a coach, and I had my sales background from like 17 years working in sales roles. But I didn't know anything about how to grow a business or make a business profitable. And I started investing in getting help with that. And in my very first full year as a coach, I think I made a grand total of about £420. That was what I earned. The second year, I started working with a business mentor, and I created and launched an online course. And I brought in about just under £7,000 that year. The year after that, my turnover was £118,000. So I had very fast growth, faster than I would recommend. Actually, I think I grew too quick. And it was because I went and I made a decision to go and invest in getting somebody else to help me know what it was I needed to be doing to grow my business. And then, of course, I've evolved into that's what I do now. People pay me and I help them to grow their business.
Wow, that is a fast trajectory you went on there over those 3 years.
Unusually fast, and I wouldn't recommend it. And even the mentor that I worked with has acknowledged to me since that he has grown as a mentor since, because what I did was I grew very fast because I could already sell. So as I learned marketing, and I'd done a psychology degree, and I did my final year dissertation in the theory of persuasion, I really got human psychology. So I had a nearly 20 years sales background, add marketing teaching on that. A lot of people struggle with marketing. They struggle with the concepts of it. It doesn't feel intuitive. People really struggle. I didn't, I just got it. So off I went, boom, 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 attracted people in, made all these sales. I had no systems in my business. I had no structure. It was just me. And the mentor has acknowledged since. I'm not going to, nobody who's listening will know who I'm talking about, so I don't feel like I'm, breaking any confidences, but he's acknowledged since that, in those days he was very focused on just helping businesses grow fast. But actually, if you don't put these foundations in place, the business is unsustainable. People will just burn out because they can't keep up. And that's what happened to me. So in the system that I now teach in my Business from the Heart program, I'm very focused on people slowing down and putting the solid foundations in place. And I really encourage people to not try and go too fast. If they take their time now and put these foundations in place, they'll grow something really sustainable and lasting. Whereas I spent quite a few years early in my business, I built this monster that I just couldn't keep up with. Because I grew too fast at the beginning. So very fast growth is not, people sometimes come to me and say, Catherine, I want to work with you. I want you to help me do what you did. I want to grow my business to 100,000 in a year. And I just say, I say, let's explore it, but I'm probably not going to recommend it for you.
Sounds like you had the right mix of skills and support to help you with that growth. And that was kind of an individual mix that you had. But when I heard you speaking, not the trajectory, but the themes that come up, it didn't really surprise me, because these same themes come up within Coaches Uncaged around the business journey that people are on. And often I hear, work with a supervisor, work with a mentor. Don't forget the skill set that you already have that could support you in creating a business alongside the coaching piece. And you work with coaches on this journey also. Is there anything you'd add to that around sort of major themes that come up?
No, nothing that we haven't already talked about. I think there is too much thinking you can figure it all out from home on your own. I really, that's probably the biggest message. You cannot figure anything out alone at home thinking about it. You have to go out into the world. You have to go networking and talk about what you do, even if you're not quite sure what you do yet, and you think you might sound clumsy or clunky. You need to do research calls and ask people questions and get to know them. You need to start coaching. You need to start charging money for coaching ASAP, even before you're qualified, because you get into the muscle, the idea of talking about money and having an exchange of money. So it's getting out there and doing, and not just thinking about it. The other thing connected to that is too much. This is going to sound like the same thing, but it's not. But it's too much doing it alone. When we start out as coaches, and a lot of other similar solo practitioner businesses, it's just us all alone at home. And it feels like us all alone at home with our computer. There's no camaraderie or office banter. There's no one to pick you up or give you a pep talk or say, I believe in you. More likely, you're surrounded by people who tell you they don't believe in you. My parents still haven't got a clue what I do. It's actually really tough. You know, I've been running the business for 11 years. I'm 52 years old. I'm all grown up. I make a good income. And yet my parents pretend that I don't even have a job. They don't ask questions about it. They're not, because they just don't understand it. And it's quite lonely, like not being able to acknowledge what I do. Whereas if I was a doctor, my mum would probably, how was your week? You know, and this thing about doing it alone from home, being connected to other people for encouragement and support, and people to remind you to keep going, I think is so, so important. And also, and I know we've already said this, but getting the help with what you don't know. This is one of the real bugbears I have. I have certain things that I get a bit of a bee in my bonnet around. And it's about, people will spend literally thousands of pounds retraining in something. They might, you know, multiple thousands of pounds to retrain as a coach, multiple thousands of pounds to retrain as a therapist. Maybe, I know with coaching it's not so long, but sometimes people might spend 3 years training and tens of thousands of pounds to train. And once they're all qualified and they've got this fantastic skill set that they can go out into the world and make a difference with, they won't spend even £50 learning how to grow that business. And it's like, if you were willing to invest all that money in learning what you don't know about how to be a coach or how to be a therapist or how to be a whatever it is, it just doesn't, you know, why wouldn't you invest a similar amount of money maybe in learning how to turn that into a business? Because you're not ever going to learn how to grow a business by sitting at home trying to figure it out. And the worst thing that happens is that people then realize that they can't figure it out themselves. So they start trying to figure out how to grow a business by looking at their social media feed. And what they see there is the multi-7-figure coaches who've got this system that helped them grow to multi-7 figures when they were already at several hundred thousand, you know, they were already doing several hundred thousand, and then this system grew them to multi-7 figures. They're not, you don't go on your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed and see people teaching you the building blocks of how to start your business in the first place, because it's not sexy and people aren't, you know, it's not a sexy thing to be teaching, and maybe you're not making, some people are probably making millions out of it. So yeah, really understanding that if you want to be successful in business, there are things that you don't know and you need to fill those gaps somehow.
Thank you. So much in there. I'm not going to try and reflect it back because I probably won't be able to say it as concisely as you did anyway. But as we're also looking, you know, at your personal journey, if you don't mind, I've got a personal question for you around, you mentioned having mental health challenges. I don't know if that was the correct term. And I wonder, you know, I'm sure there's many coaches, myself included, out there in the world creating businesses who have sometimes a dip in their mental health. What's that like across a 10-year period for you? Is there ever times where you just want to shut up shop and, you know, close down and not reply to people, but you've got this business that's like out facing and you've got a
Yeah.
show to put on, maybe not a show, but that's kind of just a word that I use. What's that like?
Yeah, and it's all about, it's all about me. I front the business. I mentor and train the clients. I do the marketing. It's it can be it's interesting because of course it's difficult, but I think I've learned, one of the things that I've learned is that business is not like a straight line trajectory. Like you don't start, I'll try and like do it as an image. You don't start down here at A and you want your successful business, which is up here at X, and then you just go like in a straight line and now suddenly you're successful. It's more like a wobbly line. And when I'm going through tough times, when I feel like I can't cope or I don't have what it takes to keep going or I can't face showing up, I remind myself that this is a dip. It's one of the dips, and that there will be ups again in the future. I'm lucky in a way that I seem to be able to, and I don't know how, I don't think there's any special secret skill I have. It's just my makeup. I seem to be able to, no matter how bad I'm feeling, I can show up and do the job. I can show up. Like I didn't, by the way, but I might have woken up this morning with crippling anxiety or struggled with very dark thoughts all morning and show up and do this, and you probably wouldn't know the difference. So I've always been able to show up no matter how I'm feeling, and I don't quite know how I do that. I have a friend who also suffers a lot with mental health problems, and she structured her business so that it's never reliant on her. For everything she does, she partners with somebody else. So if she runs a coaching program, she'll partner with another coach, which means that if she has, so in her case, if her anxiety is really crippling, she can't get out of bed at all. If she can't get out of bed, somebody else will pick up for her. Also for me now, I've been in business a lot longer. I have got a team, and I can more easily have bad days now because other people will pick up the slack for me. Yeah, and I recently heard a phrase which I wish I'd come across this like 10 years ago, because I think it's so valuable. Because I also grew my business with chronic health issues, chronic exhaustive health issues, and I still struggle with that from time to time. The bit of advice I was given was design your business for your worst days. Because if you can design a business for your worst days, then everything's going to work. And when you have good days, it's a bonus. Whereas what I've always tended to do is I'm little Miss Pollyanna. When I'm feeling amazing, everything's amazing. And we're going to go and we're going to do all these amazing things. And I plan my business for me at my very, very, very best days. And then I have a shock when I wake up one morning and I'm not well enough to work. And then as a team, we end up falling behind because I've dropped off the face of the earth for a week. So design your business for your worst days, I think, is for anyone, particularly with chronic health issues, I think is a really good piece of advice. And for people with mental health challenges, try and design it so it's not completely reliant on you all of the time. And maybe think about how can you partner with people or outsource work very early on. So like I don't do social media at all in my business at all, but I have a social media presence. It's not me. I don't touch it. So my social media and the email that went out this morning and the email that you've been referring to today, the blog about the one thing, I have no involvement in those things. Somebody else deals with that and sends them out. But obviously that comes in time, because when you're first starting out and you're completely bootstrapped, you haven't got money to pay people to send stuff out. I still wrote everything, by the way. The stuff isn't written by somebody else, but it's stuff that I've written in the past. And I've had a very challenging 18 months, actually. So I haven't been producing new content recently. So it's old stuff that's being repurposed. So I wrote that article a few years ago, but it's obviously still very relevant because you've enjoyed reading it this year.
Thank you. Yeah, and you answered my question or my musing as you were saying. You actually wrote it. So as I say, the 40 minutes have flown by. I could keep asking you questions all day. I've really, really loved the conversation, and thank you for answering so authentically and interestingly. I'm going to pass over to the audience now, just to kind of give you a bit of context. Kath's kindly said we can run over an extra 5-10 minutes if there are more questions. So we've got till 10 past if there are. Anyone have any questions, feel free to put your hand up and
there's Elena, she's right in there.
Jump in.
Hello, I also have a lot of questions. So I've already attended your another webinar, I think, when one of the series. Yeah, so it was also on coaches and cage.
Okay.
I remember I was promising to come back with feedback because it was before I started the first module, and I was planning to do donation-based model for clients. So to start charging something, but then the client could choose themselves. So I'm reporting back, it's working in 70% of cases.
Great, good to know. Yeah, because Elena asked me a sales related question about something that I had no experience of. So I said, well, the only way to know is to go and try it and see if it works.
Yeah.
So did you have any questions about my business journey?
Yeah, so maybe, so first I have a reflection. So in terms of what you said, it's good to kind of have professional help when you don't know what to do. And just, I do coaching for a woman who's providing social media services for me. So she's fully working with brand book and stuff like this. And it's just removing so much headache. So I can really see how it can help in other areas of business. And then I more have a question for you, maybe with your background, or do we keep it only on what we've talked before?
I think, Brinsley, you're wanting to keep this on my personal journey, aren't you? Because I've done a lot of sessions on sales elsewhere for Animas. Is that right?
Yeah, we can open it up. I mean, I'm hesitant to go into a more mentoring training questions, but if there's any questions for you around that whole journey or anything that might relate to Eleanor's journey, that could be interesting to explore for sure.
So my question was that I was avoiding LinkedIn for quite some time because that's my whole different profession there, which is finance. And now after 3 coaching sessions, I'm open to actually start engaging with clients there. And what you said before about charging clients as soon as possible. And I also don't like free sessions. I think it's so much when clients are coming and they're like, show me what you can. And then you feel like you're in a circus. And instead of helping somebody, you are like there to entertain. So I'm not liking this way of setup. What would be the good way to put this in the message, but to do it in a caring way, or how you say it, like heart-centered way?
To do what? Sorry.
To put a message that sessions are not free, but or like what could, because I don't want to charge like the whole price, but I also don't want to do it for free. And I think LinkedIn is not a good place for donation-based model.
I think that if you're marketing yourself on LinkedIn, which is more of a corporate platform, it's moving away from that these days. But that's its background, its history, if you like, is as a corporate-based model. If you're advertising yourself as a coach there, I think people will assume that you're charging money. It's a more commercial platform.
Okay.
I don't think you have to say, oh, here, I'm a coach, book in for a session. And by the way, it's not free. You don't need to say that. People will assume there's money involved.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Do you know, that has me want to share a bit about, because what Elena's talking about there is this process around pricing. You know, that coaches, they're in training, they often working for free. She's tried this new system, which is donation based, asking people to donate, which I haven't ever tried, but is a really interesting thing to do. But I think that I see people get very hung up on that shift from free to paid, but it also holds them back because, like I said earlier, they're not getting it in the muscle. They're not getting experience talking about money. having an exchange of money, knowing how they take the payment, knowing how they phrase the moment when they actually ask for the money. And then later on, when they're fully qualified and they're setting much more healthy prices, there's this complete block, almost like this paralysis, because they don't know how to talk about money. So I always encourage coaches to start charging really, really early. And I want to share a bit of my personal journey on this one, because some people find this quite encouraging, because I have never yet in 11 years come across a newly qualified coach who charges as little as I charged when I started in 11 years. So I started out, I think my very first practice coaching client, she was free. Then I wanted to start charging. I had done quite a few other qualifications before the coaching qualification. So I also didn't feel I was brand new for this. I was sort of itching to start at least charging money, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And I was in training at Animas, and you know, where you coach each other. And I decided to choose as a thing for my block around charging for my coaching. And I went away from that session being held accountable for advertising my coaching for £25 a session before the next like coaching workshop thing, which was like a month later, I think. Anyway, I kept procrastinating. And in the end, like, we were just literally a few days away from going back to the next coaching training, and I hadn't done it yet. And I remember sitting there on the edge of the bed, like talking to myself, like, why haven't you done it? And I was like, come on, Catherine, what is it going to take? Because clearly you're not going to charge £25 an hour, or what's it going to take? And I remember thinking, the only way that I'm going to feel brave enough to charge money for coaching is if I charge £10 a session. And you know what? This is my thing about just get in motion. That was the thing that was going to get me in motion. And that is exactly what I did. I went online. I don't know if it still is, but Gumtree back then was a great place for low-cost coaching. Advertised on Gumtree. I have never sold a single session of coaching ever. I sold 6 sessions for £60. Boom, I got a client. Great. I was up and running. I changed the advert. I changed it to £15 a session. Waited, got another client. Boom. I wasn't quite brave enough, so I got another client at 15, and then I started increasing it at £5 a time. And my current hourly rate, I don't charge my rate out by the hour, but the lowest amount you could work with me for at the moment is £1,000 plus VAT for 2 hours. So that's effectively £600 an hour. I'm totally congruent and comfortable with that price. If anything, I think it's probably a little lower than it could be. So I went from being almost too scared to charge £10 an hour to being very congruent at £500 an hour, but I wouldn't have got to this healthy price if I hadn't started where I was comfortable. So big message to coaches for me is start charging soon, but charge what you're comfortable with. It doesn't matter. There's no price police. No one's got a rule. I've never found anyone who charged £10 an hour. I've met someone who charged 11, but I got started. And if I'd kept hanging on to the idea that I need to charge more, I may never have got started.
Boom, indeed. I know that one too well, £10 a session. Yeah, and that's quite the trajectory as well. But thank you for sharing that. And I'm just wondering, Lip, you got out there with any questions?
Yes, I have a question about pros and cons of doing a group coaching or event and then leading to membership or something like that. What are your thoughts on that?
What? Sorry, on the pros and cons of
doing a group coaching or group
coaching.
training instead of one-to-one, and then from that going on to membership, I suppose, is what.
Okay, so what I'm trying to do is relate this back to the personal journey topic. So what I'm going to do is talk to you about what I did actually. Yeah. So interestingly, at the beginning of my business, I didn't do a lot of one-to-one coaching. I did in my first year when I was figuring out my niche. I did quite a lot of one-to-one. And I think the big advantage of doing one-to-one is because it helps you to really figure out your specialism, what you're good at, what you enjoy. It helps you figure out your marketing message because you're understanding more about your clients, what they need to hear, what sort of end outcome they want as a result of working with you. However, once I started this business, once I had my hallelujah, it's selling from the heart, and I teach coaches how to sell moment, then I didn't do a lot of one-to-one coaching. And that was because for me, I started running one-day workshops, but the one-day workshops were not very profitable because I had not yet learned how to make them profitable, because I hadn't learned how to do an upsell from the workshop. And so I joined a mentoring program, was encouraged to turn the one-day workshop into an online program, started selling that, and my business took off as a business based around an online group program. One of the disadvantages of, now I had an income, I've already said that I had 2 freelance sales roles at that time. I had an income. I had several £1,000s coming in every single month, so my bases were covered. I didn't have to bring in what I call chunky money every month in order to keep the show on the road and pay the bills. So I could afford to experiment with launching this group program when I didn't really know if I had enough people to launch it to or not. For a lot of coaches, when they first start out, they need to be bringing in that chunky money. And if you've left your job and you need, say, £3,000 a month to get by, then you're going to be able to do that more quickly and easily by selling one-to-one work. If you want to launch and deliver group programs, then you need to reach more people. It's obvious, but it's not always obvious. If you need to enroll one client in a month, and that one client is going to say, let's say that in 1 month you want to enroll 2 clients, and each of those clients you want them to pay you £1,000 each. All you have to do, strictly speaking, is meet and attract and engage and enroll 2 people. Now, you might need to attract more than 2 people. You might need to attract 4 people and have 4 sales conversations to get those 2 clients. But that's actually a lot easier than if you've got a group program. Because if you've got a group program, let's say it's £500 or £300, you might have to attract into your world a much higher number of people in order for a percentage of those to join your group program. So a lot of coaches and other business owners run too quickly for the group work before they've put the foundations in place to have enough people to sell to. However, what you can do is you could, knowing that you haven't reached a big audience, you could go out and intentionally run a beta program, a beta launch, where you know that you're not going to try and do some big online launch. You're just going to use your existing connections, reach out to people one-to-one and have conversations with them and invite them into your program. You asked about a membership. I've got a membership now. I launched my membership when I had been in business for 6 years. If I had launched my membership in that first year, I wouldn't have got the numbers because not enough people knew I existed. So by the time I launched my membership, I had over 600 people who'd gone through my online course. I offered it to those 600 people at first. 114 of them joined. I also had multiple thousands of people on a mailing list. So I launched it to them. Boom, another bunch of people joined. I got to above 350 members relatively quickly because of this. But let's say you're just starting out and your mailing list is like 40 people. Your membership's inevitably going to be very small. And that's okay. Right. I just want to say there's so much more to this than I can possibly cover in the time we have right now. So I'm really going over this very high level. But there are reasons why you might choose to knowingly launch a small membership. There are reasons, but you have to be quite thoughtful about whether you want to do that or not. So there are reasons and advantages. There are reasons why you might decide to launch a smaller membership. But if you want a bigger membership, so the membership I run brings in around 10,000 a month every month. That's a nice bit of revenue for me. It pays me, it pays my team, it pays my overheads. Sometimes people start memberships when they haven't got enough of an audience reach they then don't get enough people in the membership, and it can feel like a real burden needing to deliver on this membership all the time when you haven't got enough people in it. But there are pros and cons again, and actually there's a few different articles on my website about memberships as well that you could have a look at. Sorry, Brinsley, it's very hard to not stay on the personal journey when I'm getting asked business questions. So does anyone else have a question about my personal journey? I want to sort of I want to respect the purpose of the session, really.
It's all good. It's all good. And
Okay.
often they go this direction at the end of the interviews anyway. So
it's
all
wherever
good.
it goes, yeah?
Yeah, and that was a really interesting answer about the sort of conversion of the membership. And perhaps there's a part 2 to the interview or a workshop where you talk more about memberships and the detail of that.
Well, Nick and I have talked about doing that actually as well, talking more, because, you know, the thing I'm known for is teaching authentic sales. But of course, I've established this really successful membership. So in order to do that, I've had to become, you know, I don't set my stall out as an expert in memberships, but I am an expert in memberships. So yeah, I'd love to do a session on that.
Well, let's see. Watch this space. And Eleanor's got one more question, if you may, and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, I wanted to come back to your personal journey, because several times you actually mentioned that you didn't have the foundation in place when your business started off. Do you mean actually the foundation in terms of business essentials or mindset and your readiness as a person to run a bigger business?
That's a really, really great question, because I think I'm almost thinking that there are 3 sorts of foundations that people need to have in place. So you've got, yes, like the business essentials that I would say these are the pieces that if you don't have these, you're really, really going to struggle to make your business work. And they're very business nuts and boltsy. You can follow a process and get them in place. The mindset piece, actually, let me come to that third, because then I can go off on that one. The other piece, the piece that I was missing, because I had those important foundations that the business could grow from, the foundations I was missing was the back end systems and processes. I didn't have business systems, I didn't have business structures. So when I finally hired somebody to help me, I had to teach her everything. She never really learned the job. I had to let her go in the end. I had to bring someone else on, same story. So going more slowly, you need your business essential foundations in place first. Then as you start to grow, I have a pathway within the business journey. So when you first come into my membership, you're at stage 1, you've had no paying clients. You need to put these essential foundations in place first. Then once you graduate to stage 3 of this pathway, and you're like, wow, this business is actually starting to work. I'm getting clients regularly. That's the point at which, even before you think you're ready, it's really important to put these back-end systems and processes and hire your first team member. And always be thinking, what if I had, what if I was fully booked with one-to-one clients? Or what if I had 100 people in my program right now? Could I still want this? You need to be building everything for that future, which that was my big mistake. And I've really paid the price. I'm still paying the price for that now. And then, of course, the third thing, which is so important, is the mindset foundation. And absolutely, it's so important, because actually it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good your business mentor is. It doesn't matter if they give you the most on-point advice that you are going to go off and grow the most incredible business. If your own what's between your ears, your spaghetti, is full of all the reasons why you can't do it and it will never work, and the fear and the self-sabotage and the stuff you don't even know what's going on. And I have myself on a number of occasions now invested money and time in shifting some of those blocks. So from the personal journey perspective, when I say I was flailing around for that first year, not really managing to make things work, also doing things that weren't really supportive of my business, like going off for long lunches and going to yoga classes that took all morning, which is all very nice. But it was almost like I was living this lifestyle of a really successful business, but I didn't have a successful business yet. So I finally was questioning why, what is it that's causing me to not get this business off the ground? And I invested in work with an EFT practitioner, the tapping stuff. And I worked with her over, I think we did 6 sessions. And what we uncovered was that I had a deep subconscious fear of success, because I was terrified that if I was successful, I would be overwhelmed and I would be overworked and I would burn out and I would get ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and I wouldn't be able to work again. She helped me to shift all of that. Ironically, I then went off and worked with a business mentor who caused me to build a business that was exactly all that overwhelming stuff, but still she shifted that for me. Quite a number of years later, I had a new block, which was video. I absolutely knew that I'm good on video. I knew it was a really important next step in my business. And yet for 18 months, every single week, I told myself, I'm going to start doing video this week. So again, I finally invested in doing that. And it turned out that I had this really deep fear, almost that I would be killed. That was what my body thought, that I would actually die, that I would be killed if people saw me do video and didn't like it. It was this really deep primal fear from somewhere. We shifted that. I started doing video merrily all the day long, zillions of videos. Don't do them so often anymore, but that was a different time. And then at the end of 2020, I made another big investment. And these were big investments, like, you know, several £1,000s to work with people sometimes, because I'd had repeated problems with team members, repeated problems where I would hire people, they would convince me they were going to be fantastic, and actually they had the opposite effect, really detrimental to the business. But I kept repeating the same patterns. It was like unhealthy relationships where you keep dating the same person who beats you up all the time or whatever. So again, I invested in a 6-month program to work on that. And, you know, it's always interesting with these things because you can't always see the direct comparison. But I've now got an incredible team. And I've just let somebody go just 2 weeks ago. And I think in the past, I wasn't very good at letting people go. I was always giving the benefit of the doubt and making excuses. I think I'm much better now at recognizing when somebody isn't a good fit. And so, yes, that mindset stuff, and it's not even always our mindset, because mindset to me is almost like, this is the stuff we know is there. Like, I don't think I can do that, or I don't believe this. There's often this really deep unconscious stuff, and we don't even know what it is, where it came from. We can't even contact it ourselves on a conscious, rational level. And I think that work can be really important too.
Fascinating answer. Sorry, Kath, what were you saying?
I said thank you for the question.
Oh yeah, no.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting to hear about the work that you've done on yourself along that journey as well, with the EFT practitioners as well as the mentors and the supervisors.
Yeah.
We're
and
out of
sometimes
time.
not, you know, sometimes really long periods of time when I haven't done any work on myself because I just haven't wanted to. I just think sometimes I just haven't got the energy to go working on myself. It's just, oh my gosh, it just feels like too much effort. So I'm sure that, you know, I could have done so much more of this inner work, and I'd probably be at a completely different level in my business. But there's also a part of me that often just doesn't want to work that hard, and I'm happy ticking along as the imperfect me that I am. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I guess it's that balance, right? It sounds like you've created that for yourself. So thank you so much for today, Catherine, and your really interesting answers. I could keep going all day. You are great on video. Could definitely listen all day to your answers and how articulate they are. But we've got to end here. What I'm going to do is share the blog post that I mentioned I read, you know, how you found your purpose. I'm also going to share your website in the comments of the event. And on the recording. But is there anything you'd like to share with people where they can find you and what the kind of next steps might look like if they're interested to find out more about you?
Yeah, so the easy way to find out more about me is literally very old-fashioned. Go to my website, which you can find at sellingfromtheheart.com. It's also on catherinewatkin.com, but everybody knows how to spell sellingfromtheheart.com. So if you go there, you'll land on my website. When you get there, there's a few things there. There's a few different things you could sign up for, but one is my 7 steps to yes, which is a process for an authentic sales conversation. It's the thing I referred to earlier as a decision coaching model. So if you're a coach and you feel a little bit uncomfortable about the idea of sales, come and let me show you how sales can actually be really comfortable and supportive and very much more like coaching in feel than you might imagine. So you can get that on the website as well. That's at catherinewatkin.com/7 steps. And then I've also got a guide called Create a Business You Love, because I definitely went down a wrong path. That's a whole story we didn't get into today, where I actually built a really successful 6-figure business that actually I wasn't in love with. And several years ago, changed my business model completely to being the membership that it is right now. And, you know, from that, I've created this book called Create a Business You Can Fall in Love With, because it's one thing to create a successful business. It's a whole other thing to create a business that you love so much that you want to do it for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. And that sort of, it's a PDF guide that will get you started. And that's at catherinewatkin.com/guide.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'll get those links off you and post them in all the comments in all the places. So thank you so much, Kath. Have a great day out there, and we look forward to catching you sometime in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Very helpful.
Bye bye.